reach out, touch the fear, it is always there. Put on this coat of black, there ain't no going back. In the tower, you can bring your pain.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Tower Podcast, a Wheel of Time podcast. Unfortunately, Daniel could not join us because of work, and I think Josh might have got lost a little bit somewhere. He's running from Trollocs or something. He may join later on, he may not. Things do come up. But for right now, you have myself, Andrew, as your familiar host from the Black Tower Podcast, but I'm not the only one talking. But we'll introduce our lovely, lovely guest here in a second. But what I want to do before we get too far into it is go ahead and give out that all-important spoiler warning. That way nobody can say you guys didn't warn me. Now I know what happens at the end. So this episode may contain spoilers from the entire Wheel of Time series. If you have not completed the series and you care about being spoiled, it's our recommendation that you stop listening now. You have been warned. With that, so today is a very, very special episode. And there might have been a couple hints out there on Twitter. A couple of you guys might have known a little bit about what was coming, but not much. But we got some outstanding guests today. And much like what Mogideon did to Brigida, we've ripped these amazing people from their normal platform to come and talk to us. But we're going to be nice. We're going to let them go back to their homes. They're not going to start fading away and require a bond, or they're going to die. But we have guests. So if you lovely, lovely guests would like to go ahead and start saying hello to the nice people listening.
Hi, everyone. It's John from WoT Up. It's a big pleasure to be here. I want to thank you all for having me on your program. I really am honored to be a part of this and a part of such an inclusive, supportive community. I haven't been doing this very long. I've only been a YouTuber for about 4 months or so. So this is a pretty big deal for me. Thank you so much.
And hi, everyone. It's Rebecca, and my YouTube channel is Reading the Pattern. It's also awesome to be here with all of you. I totally agree. Like, the Wheel of Time has this amazing fan community. It's been really welcoming, and I just love the content everyone is producing and being a part of that. If you don't know my channel, just to give you a little bit about it, I wanted to provide this option for people who wanted to binge reread the books before the TV show comes out and didn't want to take the time to read the books. So I do a reread. It's full of spoilers. It's really a lot more than a recap, because I love doing rereads, and it's so rewarding digging into all those details. And I'm trying to do that mix of content for longtime book fans, and then some more spoiler-free content to bring in some new fans too. And a lot of that's focused on the TV show.
And I'm Lauren. I run a brand new YouTube channel called Unraveling the Pattern, and I'm just happy to be here. I'm excited to be a part of this. I love the Wheel of Time community. I've been one of those people who lurks online for years and years, but it's fun to jump into this content creation community as well. A little about my channel. I only have one video out so far. Maybe you've seen it, but I'm excited to make more. When I was a kid, like back in the 90s, before we had the internet at home, I would go to the library, and the two things I would search the most were animation and the Wheel of Time. And I discovered all these amazing theories and things online related to the Wheel of Time. I wished I knew how to animate and create videos. Now I make videos for a living, and I teach animation at a university. And I get to combine the two things I love most, which is animation and video editing, with the Wheel of Time. So that's what my channel is about. I'm very excited about what's coming. Of course, because of the TV show, that's why I got excited about it and got back into it. And it turns out the community is just as great as it's ever been, and I'm just so excited to be a part of it. My hope is eventually that my YouTube channel will turn into sort of a episode breakdown channel where we'll talk specifically about each episode. I did study film, and so I know a little bit about analyzing movies and TV, and what better thing to nerd out about than a Wheel of Time TV show. So I'm super excited. Happy to be here.
All right. And it's our absolute honor and pleasure to have you guys on. Of course, you guys being Unraveling the Pattern, WoT Up, and Reading the Pattern as first-time guest on the podcast. guys, these guys put out some amazing content. We do heavily encourage our listeners, those of you that haven't already, because I know a lot of you have already found these channels and you're like, oh, cool, I watched their videos. I want to hear more about it. Um, for those of you that haven't, definitely go check them out, subscribe to them, turn on that fancy notification bell, and comment on their videos. Let them know, hey, I heard you on the Black Tower podcast, came to check out your videos, and let them know how much you love it, because I promise you, you guys will love their content. I'll say this again at the end of the pondcast. Yes, I'm currently sitting in the middle of a pond. At the end of the podcast, I'll say this again, but a link to their channels will be in the episode description on our hosting platform, Podbean, and anywhere else that automatically ports that description over. So we're going to do a bit of a new format for us. We've never done a panel type thing. So we're going to do one of those kind of round robin style thingies with our fellow content creators here. We've chosen a few topics to discuss. We've all taken some time to prepare our thoughts and jot down some notes and stuff to talk about. And we'll go around to each individual person. Generally have about 2 to 3 minutes to voice our opinion on the topic initially. And then after everybody's gone through their first 2 to 3 minutes, we'll give everybody about a minute or two to go back and respond to the other opinions before moving on to the next. This is kind of crucial given the number of people that we have currently recording with this and the number of people we also expected. Obviously, we didn't know that far ahead of time that Daniel and Josh wouldn't be able to make it. But this is so we don't keep people here for a bunch of hours and you miss everything you ever want to do in your actual life. So with that, we're going to introduce the first topic. So topic 1 is going to be our hopes and concerns for the TV series, and it can include casting. And Unraveling the Pattern, you have first go.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I also forgot to mention, I'm excited to be here with John and Rebecca. I really like their channels, and it's just an honor to be here.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Okay, first off, when it comes to casting, I'm totally on board. I know that there's been some controversy about that, but I love the casting. Even Bella being a male horse, I'm okay with that. I actually saw someone's comment recently that made me laugh a little bit. That they said something like, they may have to, use VFX to cover up the horse's genitals or something. And I thought that was really hilarious because, in my opinion, they should use their resources for something else. Like they should improve the VFX or the acting or the sets or something else with their budget. To me, that is not a deal breaker. I was recently talking to a buddy about Star Wars, and he said something to the effect of, I can't really have an objective conversation about Star Wars because I'm a Star Wars apologist. He said that he doesn't really understand the criticism. And this is kind of the approach that I hope to take with the Wheel of Time. I love when other people have dissenting opinions, and I think it creates a great discourse. But my personal hope is that I can just kind of be that Wheel of Time apologist, that I can be the one who's just like, look, Rafe and the team are doing their best. It's not going to be exactly like the books. It's impossible to adapt something that way. But that being said, if it's a turd, it's a turd. You can only polish a turd so much and it's still a turd, right? So I'm a little nervous about the show. I want it to be great. Of course, I'm concerned. I really don't think that Amazon would be stupid enough to take it in the direction that, say, like MTV did with the Shannara Chronicles, or back when ABC tried to do the Sword of Truth and totally just butchered the whole thing. I think Amazon really understands that they have to have a hit here. Game of Thrones was so popular. They've got Lord of the Rings, which, based on some of the announcements we have, it sounds like Wheel of Time will be coming out first. So they kind of have to prove, right, that they know what they're doing so that people will also be on board for the Lord of the Rings. So I really just want to trust them and hope for the best. As far as my very minor concerns, there are a few. I obviously want the VFX to be good. And when I say VFX, I mean like the digital effects. There's also special effects, right, which are adding in explosions and actual live smoke and all that stuff. That stuff is, I like to separate those two, right? VFX is when you add it in later with a computer. If the Trollocs look all like digital, I'm going to be sad. I really hope they go with like prosthetics and other things. but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully it'll be great, whatever they do. As far as my biggest concern, though, there's been a lot of rumors swirling about these shows being one book crammed into 4 episodes. And there's a lot of good discussion about that right now, but I really hope that they make each book at least 5 to 6 episodes. And I think they're tricking us a little bit with some of these episode titles. I really do think they are mixing in some New Spring and some Low Gain stuff. But I think at the end of the day, they're probably going to have Tarwin's Gap happen a little later than episode 4. At least that's my hope.
Mhm.
But yeah, those are my hopes for the show.
All right. Well, thank you all again. What I hope to see, honestly, is a slick, well thought out adaptation, and I'm stressing the word adaptation here. I've said it from day one on my channel that I don't believe a shot for shot remake of the books would work at all. Like it just can't. So they're going to cut some things, and I know Rafe has gone on record as saying a few times that he doesn't want to cut anything, any characters or scenes or anything, but he's going to have to. And he's already said they're going to expand some stuff. So we know already from leaks and things that there are going to be some changes from the books, at least a little bit anyway. But as far as casting goes, I'm super happy with the casting so far. Most of the actors that were cast were my headcanon anyway. So I personally don't understand how people were so upset about some of the castings. That's what they thought or whatever. But I think how the actors interact with each other and their chemistry together is more important than anything else. So I'd like to see someone portray Rand. Maybe he doesn't look like you think Rand would look in your head, but I want to see him act like Rand would. That's my biggest, hope for the show. As far as fears go, like Unraveling the Pattern said, the CG, the show's going to be CG heavy. It has to be. I'm a huge fan of practical effects. I grew up in the 80s, so all of the old shows like Aliens, all of those shows like that with a lot of practical effects, I lived on those, and I love practical effects so much, and I prefer seeing that over the digital effects. However, in this day and age, we know that digital is pretty much the cheaper and easier way to go in a lot of instances. And with the channeling and with the shadow spawn and with even with the settings like the cities and stuff, there's going to be a whole lot of CG in it. And I think I mentioned this in one of my videos before too, where I said that if it looks anything like Blade 2, I'm not going to be happy, because the fight scene in front of the lights in Blade 2 just ruined the whole movie for me. It was the worst CG I've seen in a movie ever. So if they can make it slick and polished, I'll be super happy. But what could potentially ruin the show for me is the CG.
So yeah, it's interesting. Like I don't know. I'm just not worried about the CG. I definitely see how it could make or break. But I for some reason I'm not too worried about that. But and like the speculation about doing all of book 1 in 4 episodes. I've talked a lot about that elsewhere. So I think it could be done. I'm not too concerned about that. I think honestly the biggest concern that I think is actually really a mistake I think they are likely to make is releasing the season in a dump rather than weekly. It seems like that's sort of the prevailing thought, is that they're going to do that. And I think it would be a missed opportunity to build hype for the show over time. We'll see. I'm really just been thrilled and reassured by everything official announcements we've gotten out of the show, especially casting. I'm so excited about it. If you've seen my channel, you probably know that, but I think Rosamund Pike is going to be absolutely brilliant. Every other casting announcement and peak we've gotten into production it's given me more to be excited about. I do have, I guess, some concerns that at this point are mostly based on just rumors that are out there. So one of those is that, so there's the casting of Helena Westerman supposedly as Layla Ibarra, and that's not been confirmed. I don't buy into this theory that she's going to be Perrin's wife, who's going to be killed in the first episode. So I don't think that fits with the direction that Rafe seems to be going in. And if it does somehow turn out to be true, though, I think that would be a mistake. So that would be a concern of mine. I'm just holding out for this idea that Layla is a fake name they've given the character, and she's going to eventually be revealed to be cast in some other role. I'm hoping Elaine, but that might be wishful thinking. And then I was like I said, kind of concerned about this idea of doing the Eye of the World in 4 episodes. I think you've all seen that video that Nablus did breaking down how that could work. So that really reassured me. If they go in that direction, it doesn't have to be crazy. We shouldn't assume that's what they're going to do, but I'm open to it. And then basically my fears just boil down to pacing issues, or if they make significant changes to character arcs without a good foundation for it. We're definitely going to get some changes, and I'm totally fine with that. And I think when you have people like Rafe and Sarah involved, I do trust them that they're going to stay true to the soul of the books. And I'm just hoping that I'm going to be as invested in this show as I am in the books, and then be able to create content for each episode as it comes out.
Yeah, I know for me, just like Rebecca just said, I have a lot of faith in all the people that are putting this together. I mean, you don't pull in someone like Sarah Nakamura, who has such an absurdly but fantastic record of rereads of the Wheel of Time series. Um, and you don't pull in a showrunner like Rafe, who is so interactive with the community from the start, as well as Sarah is as well, and many other members of the production team and the writing room. You don't do all that without people that are actually invested in it. I'm sure there's probably already been a fair number of heated discussions between, people like Sarah and people that maybe aren't as familiar with the series, where they're like, "Well, why don't we cut this?" And no, you can't. It's so important because this leads to this, leads to this. Um, so I can't imagine the stress of being chiefly a fan of the series, having to be a part of the team that's going through determining what realistically can and cannot be in the series, what's going to have to be shortened down, what's going to have to be cut, who's going to have to be cut. 'Cause I think even the fandom, when we get down to the nitty gritty of it, we understand that a series that is over 4 million words long with over 2,600 named characters, you're not going to be able to include every word, which for like Winter's Heart and Path of Daggers and stuff, we're more than thankful that you don't have to include every word. Um, please, there's so much time saving you can do there to include so much else from the books. But I think they're going to do it justice, and because they're fans, they're going to have seen that pilot that shall not be named. That all of us hate it so much, with the exception of maybe one actor in it. But so I think they're going to do good. I mean, always pacing is going to be an issue. I was one of the people that, growing up, I read Harry Potter, and then, you read the first book where he spends hours in Ollivander's shop going through thousands of wands. And then in the movie, he goes through 3.
Mm.
I think there was a better way they could have done it in that, they could have like kind of faded to black and came back and there was a bunch of boxes everywhere. But ultimately, I still love the movies. I still think they were fantastic movies. And I think that's ultimately the way that anybody that has actually read the series that a TV show is coming from, you're going to have to acknowledge that it is an adaptation. It's not a scene for scene, word for word remake, which is a good thing in a lot of instances. There's a lot of descriptive passages in the Wheel of Time series and just about every chapter in every book that no longer have to be something there. We don't have to have a narrator describing what, the trousers and coat that Min is wearing, because we'll see it. We don't have to deal with people describing, men by their hairy chest or women by the size of their bosom, because one, it's irrelevant, but two, it'll be on the screen. It'll be, in some cases, 2 to 3 pages worth of description of a character that you'll just see automatically on the screen. So that cuts out a lot of it. And I think that part's going to make a lot of people happy. One of the things I really enjoyed from the series, and you don't see too much of it from the first book or two, see a little bit of it in the second book, but the politicking and the romance that makes up the series. We did an episode about, possible early indicators of the romance between Tom and Moraine. And I wonder, are we still going to be able to see those potential early indicators, from the scenes like Terran Ferry, and even, the night of leave takings when, they leave Amon's field. How is that going to be conveyed in the screen? Is it going to be conveyed on the screen? Would it be too obvious? for people that aren't familiar with the series to see that so early on. So pacing, of course, is a concern, but I do want to see how they're able to convey the romance and the politicking in a fantasy series that is jam packed with action, that is coming in as potentially the biggest show since Game of Thrones came out, in a way that fans will enjoy. Um, but I'm most excited to see how they're going to wind up handling channeling on the screen. Um, I would love it if there was like, you're looking at it from Rand's perspective and you can see all the weaves and he's fighting, and then it just shows like some random warrior off to the side looking, and there's just two men staring at each other or something. That'd be hilarious. Um, but my biggest concern actually doesn't come from the series itself. My biggest concern is honestly the fandom in general. We've been very fortunate, and that's by we I mean like the Twitter of Time folks, that it's a very accepting, very kind community where people discuss things, they have conversations, and whenever things start to get kind of too far out of whack, somebody says, like, "Hey, we should stop this," and it's no big deal. And we've seen other platforms where these discussions haven't gone the same way, but it kind of comes twofold because as fans of the series that, to whatever varying degrees, know the ins and out of the series, it's all too easy for people like myself or Rebecca or John or Lauren here to sit there and be like, "That's not how it happened in the series. You're wrong, Rafe. I'm coming for you."
Yeah.
It's all too easy to do that, right?
Mhm.
And in the end, I'm gonna have to police myself. We're all gonna have to kind of police ourselves. And yeah, we'll talk about it how this is different, in this episode than it was in the books. But and at the end, I'm hoping that the fandom just realizes that this book series that we've loved for so long is finally making its way onto the screen in a far better way than it ever did with that forbidden pilot. YouTube, please take it down. Can we forget that? But that's the biggest thing. It's going to have to, like one of you guys said earlier, it's going to have to appeal not only to fans of the series, but as well as people that have never heard of the series at all.
Right.
And Amazon does have stuff to prove. They got to show that, that they can match HBO with Game of Thrones. They got to show that they can make series and bring things to viewers that are just as entertaining. And they're doing that with some other shows too. But I think this will be a really good first test, and it'll be a really good indicator of how well the Lord of the Rings is going to go for them.
Yeah. I've heard people say this recently on Facebook and other places, but I totally agree with this. And that is just this series is not ruining the books. They still exist. They're not going anywhere, right? This is kind of just like thinking of it as another turning of the wheel. It's not the exact cycle. It's just similar. And I like to think of it that way. Like if we get all caught up in comparing what was in the books or what wasn't, we're going to have a bad time. For me, the thing that is going to help just keep us interested is if they get the characters right. If the character moments are impactful the way they are in the books. I can forgive if maybe the Murdral doesn't look exactly how I expected, or sometimes they make little different choices with how characters interact, or even if they cut certain minor characters. If the core cast and characters are treated properly to the source material, then I think it's going to be great. As in response to some of the things you guys mentioned about like the CGI, like that is definitely a concern, but I think, again, I have to trust that they know they can't just overdo it. Even with some of the recent leaks with things like the supposed Waygate or Portal Stone or whatever that might be, it seems like they're going to be mixing live stuff with CGI, and I think that's the way it's got to be done. I'm not too concerned about that. I also think that the fandom it's going to be interesting if, as we all hope, the show explodes. More people are going to start reading the books. There's going to be so much discussion online. That's going to be so exciting. But you're also going to get some of the bad with that. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens. The other thing, I think, Andrew, you mentioned this, and I really liked what you said. We talk so much about what we're worried they're going to cut, but there are definitely some things I want them to add. Things like the potential romance between Tom and Moraine, that needs to be way less subtle. I mean, it doesn't need to be hit over your head either, but we need to see it coming, at least to some degree, right? Mm-hmm. And you do in the books on a reread, but most of us, I don't think, on our first read through realized that was a thing.
Oh.
And I think the same is true. At least, I was only like 13 when I read the first book, so a lot of it was over my head. But like Lan and Nynaeve being interested in each other, that didn't even click for me at first. So I'm sure that they'll be able to add some things that will help that. I am also concerned about that rumor about Perrin having a wife. That would be a huge mistake for his character, in my opinion. It goes completely outside of Perrin's character. He doesn't know how to even talk to girls. If you're married, guess what? You know how to talk to girls.
Just silly.
So anyway, I love all your responses. Those are my follow-up responses.
I do agree that an adaptation is the way to go. Shot for shot's not going to work. And I think what you're saying there is when they're going to add things. There's so many things I want them to add. You mentioned, the love interest between Moraine and Tom, things like that, but bigger things like Tane. I want to see him fleshed out. I want to see him be turned to the Shadow. I want to see his journey to become part of the Shadow. I want to see Demandred and Shara. I want to see all of that.
Yeah.
And there are full seasons there that could do that. And there's so much, I don't want to say redundancy they can cut, but there's a lot of things in the books that are maybe not as exciting to read, or they'd be okay to read, but it wouldn't look so exciting on the screen. And I've gone on record and said this a few times. They are not making this series for us. They're not making it for the fans because we are going to be the minority when the show comes out. At least that's what they're hoping. So if the show becomes big and it becomes a big hit, like Game of Thrones, I had read the books first, and I had been still waiting on Winds of Winter. Like I'm still waiting on that last one. And the readers are going to be the minority, they hope, because you have umpteen numbers of hundreds of thousands, or perhaps in the small millions of people who've read the series who may watch the show, but they're hoping for 10 million plus views or more for these episodes if they want to match Game of Thrones and be as big and make the money that Game of Thrones did. So you're looking at the readers being a small percentage. So although the show will be an adaptation and it will be about the books and it will feature the characters we know and love and the plot lines we know and love to a certain extent, certain degree, to make it look good on the screen, to make it look slick, to draw the regular person in, they're going to add, change, cut, remove. I hope not as bad as Game of Thrones did, because the show became completely off and left field compared to the books. But they're not going to make the show for us, at least not initially. We may see the first season mostly featured on the books because we're really invested in this, and that's where the core audience is going to be. But as the show gets more popular, kind of like Game of Thrones, I think they will stray further and further. Not because Rafe isn't doing a good job or Sarah isn't doing a good job, but because Amazon holds the checkbook and they want to make money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I really agree with so many great points that you all have brought up. The main point here being the show is going to be its own entity. It's not the books, and it shouldn't try to recreate exactly the way the books went. It's a different medium. It has to be its own thing. And it's an opportunity to improve some things, like just going back to what Andrew's point about how they're going to handle the romance in the series in general. That wasn't really the strongest point of the books, how a lot of the romances were developed. So yeah, I definitely want to see more of that. And, in the books, you have this limitation where early on, especially, everything's from Rand's perspective, and he's clueless. He doesn't know that Nynaeve and Lan are falling in love. But in the show, I think we're going to be able to see that, and we can see more Moraine and Tom. And I hope that they can improve, some others as well.
Like Elaine and Rand. I mean, that kind of doesn't feel very well fleshed out. Or like even Min, like, well, I guess I have to love you now. Like hopefully there's a little more to it.
They can do better with that whole relationship for sure. And then Egwene and Gawain could be something different as well. And I hope they do something better with that. And, the problem with Game of Thrones, I don't think, was that they strayed so far from the way the books went. The problem is when they just rushed and forgot that the characters were the center of it, and they needed, time to hit these huge moments. And so if they do hit the character moments in the show, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Agreed. Nobody wants to see season 8 of Game of Thrones again.
Nope.
No.
Never. This is kind of a double-edged sword, because you have one of the reasons that Game of Thrones was so rushed in the end is because the two guys who run it, I can't remember their names. D&D is what everyone calls them.
Dan and Dave. Yep. Dan and Dave. Yeah.
they became so popular that they had signed all these deals to do all this other stuff, and
Yeah.
frankly, I think they were kind of done with it. They're like, let's get this out of the way so we can do all these other cool projects that we're
Yeah.
interested in.
How'd that
And
work out?
yeah,
Not so
my
well.
concern
No
is
more
though,
Star Wars.
Rafe may be in a similar situation 5 years down the road from now, where he may be like, you know what, I'm done with this. I want to move on to this Star Wars thing or whatever else.
Maybe.
And
But
so,
you know, he loves the books, and I don't think Dan and Dave were like these huge fans of the book in
true.
the first place.
I
But
mean, and Rafe knows that we as a fandom will never let him get away with it anyway. So
But I also think it's okay to pass the show off to someone else who has the same
Yeah.
passion you started with. Like,
well,
there's no
at a
reason
minimum,
why you have to have the same showrunner the whole way
yeah,
through.
and you don't need to write all the episodes. I mean, like they could have stepped back and had other people take on more aspects of it, and they should have.
Anyway,
oh yeah, definitely. But I look forward to it. I do think it is important, as John has already said, that to keep in mind that it is an adaptation. And I think maybe you said this, Rebecca. My memory is not always the greatest. That it will exist as a separate
Mhm.
entity based on the books. The books will forever be there for us to go back and read and enjoy. Um, barring some kind of mass crusade against fiction writing.
Mhm.
But yeah, fantastic. So on to our second topic, and Rebecca, you will be the first one to talk
Okay.
about this one. So the topic is, go ahead and if you have any, discuss one or two of the most influential scenes from the books, and or one or two characters from the series, and why you found them to be, for you, some of the most influential.
Okay. Yeah, this is so tough, but so one of the things that jumped out to me, just in terms of having an influence on everything else that happens later, is when Maureen goes through the doorway in Roydian. Because to me, that one event really changes the trajectory of the story, especially for Rand, other characters as well, but Rand absolutely. And I think it's the first really big shocking moment that happens in the series. You have these two huge characters that seem to go out in a blaze of glory. That moment, I think it like reminds us of Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, but that similarity to me, that doesn't lessen the impact of what happens here. Obviously it affects, like I said, Rand, Lan, Nynaeve. I don't think Rand ever gets over it. And then we also see later on how Tom and Matt are affected by that too. So there's just all these ripples in the story that start at that point. And then like a later moment that jumps out to me is that as being kind of series defining is Nynaeve raising the golden crane, and then Lan as he sort of gradually accepts that. Because to me, choosing to accept leadership and then also allowing others to risk themselves because they care as much as you do, those are just two huge themes in the series. And for Nynaeve, it's like she's doing what she does because she's trying to protect the man she loves. That's Nynaeve. That's who she is, determined to protect the people she cares about. And then we get Lan accepting who he is and the role he's playing. So it's hugely emotional. It is in the books, and it should be in the show too. And then I have to give a shout for an influential character to Varen, and I think one of my fellow panelists is going to mention her as well. But she's my absolute favorite secondary character. No one to me exemplifies mystery more than she does, and that's a huge part of what like so many fans love about this series is all the mystery and trying to figure out what's going on. Varen is the best of that, and then her life's work is like no one else could have done what she did. So that's it. I'll leave it there.
I completely agree. Those are all so great. It's almost unfair to ask us what our favorite one or two scenes are in a 14-book
I know.
epic fantasy.
Life isn't fair. The will weaves as it wills. Bro.
I get it, yeah.
We're going to go ahead and let John go. We might be doing some editing magic here because John
Sure.
is down to about
Yep.
15 minutes or so, yeah.
Yeah, about 15 minutes or so. So we're
So
going to get.
I can do the topic 2 and topic 3 right in a row if you want, and then say my goodbyes, like bang, 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 and then you guys can discuss what I said afterwards. How does that sound? Good.
That'd be great.
I'm fine with that. Rebecca, Lauren,
Are you okay?
good?
Yep. No problem.
Yeah.
Awesome. So most influential scene and character together for me are Varen. I know Rebecca just said it, but with her, she is one of the most important characters in the entire series, as far as I'm concerned. She's my favorite as well. I'm a little sad we don't have the casting just yet, because I really, really would like to see who's playing her, because I'm super excited about that. But through the whole book, we didn't really know, and some fans, as you read the books the first time as they were coming out, kind of sort of guessed at what Varen's deal was, but no one, I don't think, and everything I've read of Theoryland and everything else online, and Wheel Time Mania way back in the day in the 90s when I was on that, no one really hit the nail on the head and said she was a dark friend, that
Right.
she joined the Black Aja to infiltrate and be a mole. Like that was never guessed at. It was, to me, the biggest surprise of the entire series. And when she turned to Egwene and said, "Your dress is green," I dropped the book, and I was so excited, and so like I did a little dance. It was awesome. And I want to see that scene done just as it was in the books. And I expect to cry a lot when the scene happens too, because it's such a big deal for me. But and this is where the I may not be so popular with some people, is I want them to show all of it leading up to that. I don't want it to be a surprise to the audience, because when you're reading the books and you can kind of get the snippets and stuff, and it was a huge shock. But in a show like that, if they don't show the audience all the way up, and it's a big like MacGuffin at the end where they go ta-da, I don't think it would work as well. I think if at least they did some foreshadowing, or they showed her involvement with Dark Friends and things like that, and her Warriors involvement, and how they wanted to get out, and all of that as little snippets here and there, it might make that just a bit sweeter to see on the screen. That's my take on that, at least, anyway.
Talked about Maureen.
Yeah.
And
You both mentioned Varen, and I mean, of course, I cannot wait for that. And we talk about cutting characters sometimes, or combining characters into like two different characters into one. I know there's been some speculation that Alana might play a larger role, and that she may be combined with other Aes Sedai. Whatever the case is, you cannot cut Varen. She is so important. I remember this theory back in the day that people thought she was what they called the purple Aja.
yeah, I remember that too.
You remember that theory?
Yeah.
That was great. And I love what John said. Like, everyone had their theories, but no one got it just right.
Not exactly.
And
yeah.
it was so amazing when that reveal happened. I personally disagree, though. I don't think that we should see her doing those things too obviously behind the scenes. It would be great if maybe you had some mysterious things going on throughout the seasons, and then maybe in the episode where it's revealed that she is who she is, that maybe you almost flash back to some of those things and go, "Oh, it was Varen," or whatever.
That would be thinking the exact thing. I totally agree there. Yeah.
Varen killed Asmodine.
Yeah, maybe. But that scene is so good. When I think back on the series, almost all of my favorite scenes happen in the Shadow Rising. The Bubbles of Evil was such a cool concept. I loved all of that. When Rand and Matt and the others go to Ruidian, I just loved all of that as well. The redstone door frames, the columns, seeing through the eyes of the ancestors, like all of that was so cool to me. And for me, the Shadow Rising is when the series sort of becomes much bigger in scope. Books 1, 2, and 3 are kind of their own self-contained stories. They have a beginning, middle, and end, and everyone kind of meets up happy at the end. But with book 4, everything starts to splinter, and you have these huge plot lines that start to branch out. And I just feel like that book has some of the most iconic scenes that I really hope they don't cut. But as I was thinking about this question, like, what scene do I want to see on screen? Obviously, those big ones are huge. But there's this great little scene in The Dragon Reborn when Matt escapes from the tower after he's been healed from the dagger, and he gets out of the tower, and this is when he first realizes he's got this amazing luck, and he's going from place to place, and he's gambling, and his luck is just like on fire, right? He's just winning everywhere, and he's just like almost got this fever. And then there are these guys that are chasing him, these footpads that are chasing him through the streets, and he like jumps up on the rooftops in Tar Valon, and he's running around and being crazy. And then there's this moment where he's on this bridge with this guy who's trying to kill him, and they grapple and they fall off the bridge together. And as luck would have it, right, he lands on the guy's body. The dagger goes straight into the guy's heart. He basically just like stands up and wipes off the dust and he's fine. And then he sort of like, it all comes crashing down what just happened. You know, it's almost like this realization, what just happened? And I don't know, that whole scene, it's got such a great feeling
He's
of
Domino.
it's like
He's
comedy.
Domino. Luck is a superpower.
It really is. It's great. And then he meets Tom, and Tom is just like wallowing in his own self misery, right? He's drunk and he's trying to drink himself to death. And Matt is starving and he's eating like all these chickens and all this stuff. I don't know, the whole how that all plays out. To me, that's when I started to really fall in love with Matt's character. That's the moment when he goes from being kind of the bratty Matt to, and I think Rebecca, you discussed this on the latest Dusty Wheel video, where some people didn't really like Matt because they didn't really understand his inner monologue until later.
Right.
And that's
Absolutely.
kind of his first inner monologue where we really go, oh, this guy's hilarious, you know?
Yeah.
And that just opened up his character for me. So I really hope they get the tone of his character right in that moment.
Oh yeah. So for me, when I was trying to figure out in the 2 hours before we started recording, when I realized I hadn't written anything down yet, and I'm starting to think about what are those influential scenes for me. And for me, the first one is Rand's fight in the sky with Baalzamon. It's one of those, like, you get to see that Rand full, like, to his core believes that this is it. I'm fighting the Dark One. Let's ignore everything the prophecy ever said about anything that's ever going to happen. This has got to be it right now, because this has got to be Shaitan. This has got to be the Dark One that I'm fighting right here. And he fights with that vigor of, I have to win. I've got to save everybody. You know, and there's a bunch of prophecies that have been fulfilled right before this. And during this battle, you know, he receives the second of his Heron mark scars. And then we get the very sweet scene after that where, you know, Min goes and finds him. She's distraught. She stays in bed with him. Lanfear shows up. It's like, okay, bitch, I'll let you look after my man for now, but I'm coming for him. Don't touch him any more than you have to, kind of thing. But for me, what makes it so influential, so impactful, is that Rand comes out of this fight with the full knowledge of, maybe I can do this. You know, I just defeated this guy that's been haunting my dreams for the entirety of the last fucking book.
Yeah.
And I just put a sword through his chest. Yeah, he kind of stabbed me too. But, you know, I won. I came out. You know, maybe this is my destiny. Maybe this, you know, I am the Dragon Reborn. I can do this. This is what I'm supposed to do. And he gets to wake up next to someone that he doesn't realize it then, or maybe he just didn't want to, or maybe he's just a wool-headed sheep herder. You know, waking up next to somebody. If you don't love men, then we can't be friends. Sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sorry at all. I'm not in the slightest.
Sorry, not sorry.
I wish I could find a woman like men. But it's just such one of those fantastic scenes where you can see Rand going into it thinking this is it, being fully prepared at that time to do what needs to be done. And to me, that just lays the framework for his resolve going forward. But it also is a good lesson, not just for Rand, but for us as the readers, on how little is actually known right now.
Right.
Because based off what we've seen, like, because of the reality of us watching a bunch of fantasy or reading fantasy or, you know, just about any TV series, you know, you're used to this kind of trope where it seems like you're fighting the big bad guy and either he actually wasn't the big bad guy or he's actually not dead. Or both. And we kind of get, you know, reminded of this in this scene that it's like, you know, he's Rand sitting there, you know, even I think at one point he even tells Rain, yeah, I did it. I killed the Dark One. And she's like, you're a fool if you think the Dark One's dead. The next scene, and I always have to explain this, whether people have heard my explanation, if you've listened to the podcast enough, you've heard me talk about this scene, you know it's my favorite scene. But perhaps you've heard of a little snowy place called Trimoking, where a certain person that should be used to the opposite of snow, Panic, travels to and gets chased by old Loverboy Dragon. Yeah, you know, I think I'm hoping that it's not officially, but most of the fandom recognizes it as the sex igloo scene in Fires of Heaven. It is my favorite scene, not because they get it on, but from the interactions. I'm a huge anime nerd, so you see this kind of trope where it's the woman that is always angry with the guy and everything that winds up getting together, and you always want them to get together, or most of the time. And when they do, it's absolutely beautiful.
Mhm.
And for me, this was one of those things. It's like, yes, finally, about fucking time. Thank God,
Yeah,
or thank the creator.
it's a huge
Uh,
relief too. Yeah.
oh
It
yeah,
really
oh, yeah.
is.
But they do it in a way that it's realistic and relatable. It's something that logically flows. In a moment of what Avienda is going to see as absolute weakness, not only does she feel embarrassment at being seen naked, which is a new thing for the IL, but she actually flees the scene, which is new for the IL. They don't flee, they don't run away, no matter what the problem is. And she does, and he goes after her and he saves her life. So, she's got this significant amount of toe for acting in a dishonorable way, and he receives a certain amount of G for rescuing her. Um, and you could argue that it was or wasn't repaid during this chain of events, depending on how you want to look at things. That's a interesting way to look at potential prostitution, but I don't think that works.
No.
Um, but you finally get to see this power couple come together, whether they realize it or not. Well, I mean, they do realize what happened. And I think it takes them a little bit to come to terms with it, but I loved it because it is so realistic and relatable. And from time to time, I'm a sucker for the romance aspect of stories.
Well, and speaking of romances, we were talking earlier about some of them don't seem to really make sense or fit. This
Uh-huh.
one absolutely does. There's so much tension there, and it's so well developed. So then, when it finally does happen, it really is just a great relief, right?
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
This one is like because they have this long chunk of time when they're together, interacting in the way that they do before this moment. It is a much clearer and much better setup than a lot of the others. I agree.
I mean,
I
it's the
hope
main
that,
relationship we get to see actually start, develop, and grow.
Hmm.
right. I hope they
You don't
get
get to
G
see a lot of the others.
toe right because there is so much interesting complexity there with Avienda completely fighting it and Rand not realizing that everything he does goes
Hmm.
against her core beliefs, but it also is something she really wants. Like that's so well written and done. I
Oh yeah,
hope that they're able to explain that well through the show.
I love the IL culture and everything about it. Um,
Absolutely.
except for Coldane and what's her name, Savannah,
Oh well, yeah.
Gina.
They don't count.
But you're supposed to hate them, right? So it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Oh
There's a lot
yeah.
of people you're supposed to hate, and some of those people you're supposed to hate by the end you're supposed to love. Um, but as for characters, for me, the two most influential characters, well, I'll go chronologically on this. The first one is Tom. Um, he's the person that gives Random Matt the skills to survive those early days when they're on the road to like Four Kings and eventually to Camelin. Without what they learned from him, these boys would have starved. They would have never made it. I mean, you could well, I say that based off of what we see, that's what would have happened. I mean, severe nature, they would have found something one way or the other. But Tom really gives them the tools to go out, find ways to survive, and seize it themselves, and potentially survive better than they would have just relying on the severe nature. Which is arguably tainted for Matt at this time because of the dagger
Mhm.
from Shadar Logoth.
Tom is the
Um,
dadder.
yeah, Tom is the dadder,
Okay.
the granddadder, granddadder Tom.
Aw.
Teach me how to play the harp. Um, but then then you get to see all of this work he does in the background. After Ran takes over Tyr and takes down the Stone of Tyr, all the work that Tom and Moraine at the same time are doing in the background, all of that, and towards the end where Tom does go and rescue Moraine, just Tom's actions, his character development, and being there at such crucial moments. He's your favorite Gleeman. And
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, he's the only real Gleeman, even though he does a lot of not Gleeman-y stuff. But
No,
um,
he's an underestimated character. He really
oh
is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
yeah, and then the last influential character that I wanted to pick for this is Asmodine, actually. Um, whether it was what he wanted to do or not wanted to do, it doesn't matter. He teaches Rand so much about history and channeling, how to invert weaves, how to lay traps and invert those weaves, how to disguise things. And it lays the groundwork later on, when he sends, which Ashaman is it that he sends to retrieve Kalendor?
Ooh,
Narishma?
Arishma, is that it?
Thanks for Narishma. He lays the framework through Rand for that prophecy to be fulfilled, which is almost ironic considering that he's a Forsaken. Um, I just, without some of the stuff that Asmodee teaches Rand, um, you can argue that perhaps Rand wouldn't have been as emo early on as he was. Um, by listening to their age equivalent of My Chemical Romance come from Asmodee's harp all the time. But
Love it.
that's all I want to see now is Asmodee playing, Welcome to the Black Parade on the harp on the screen now. But I think he had a major influence on what Rand wound up becoming, and without the stuff he learned from Asmodee, life would have been far harder for Rand, given his unwillingness to accept his history. I'll leave it at history.
It's a great trope too, or it's just a great anti-trope, I guess. The idea that you're taking some of the Forsaken are kind of silly caricatures, right?
Mhm.
Now you have this one who's supposed to be an evil bad guy, and he's brought into this world of being the mentor of the good guy. I love that dynamic. I think it's really fascinating to see Asmodean not even really wanting to be that evil, to be honest. I mean, he's certainly done some evil things, but he almost gets hopeful that Rand will win in the end, which is a really cool twist, having a bad guy turn to the good side. I know it's not so much a twist, it happens all the time, but
he knows that he can't go back because he has helped the Dragon Reborn.
Right.
So his only hope at living is for the Dragon Reborn to win. Now, of course, Grendel has other plans, but
Yeah. So I mean, you could question how serious he is, genuine about that. But the thing that made Asmodean interesting to me was even just his reason for turning to Shadow in the first place. It's just not what you expect. And so the fact that someone, is like that passionate about music and goes in that direction, it just sort of makes you curious about him. Like, who is this guy? It's strange.
It is. But don't some people say that Hitler was sort of like, wasn't Hitler an artist? And some people think that one of the reasons he went the way he did is because his art was rejected.
that's what I was about to say. It's like it's a contributing factor.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to be fair, like there's never one thing, in these kinds of. I mean, someone going evil, you can never put it down to one thing, but it made him a little interesting.
For sure.
Yeah.
I really loved Asmodee. Or what did they call him when he was around everybody else? Natel, I think.
Yeah.
Jason Natel or something.
Jason Natel, official Gleeman to the Dragon Reborn.
Right.
Gave him an excuse to walk around playing his harp of sad songs, walking down his lonely road. Lonely road.
See, and this is another thing I love about the series, and I hope they get this right in the show. I mean, if they don't, they don't. But you have these. Everything that happens in the books happens from one point of view, and that person may think they're getting away with things, and they aren't. I think Moraine pretty much knew that one of the Forsaken was with Rand.
At some point, she did for sure. Yeah,
she revealed it to in her letter to Rand.
Right.
She meant to be careful of Mr. Natal,
right?
Because he is still who he always was.
And I love that Rand thinks I'm getting away with this thing. No one knows. It'll be our little secret. And yet, you have people like Moraine or Varen who obviously understand more than they're letting on. Another little thing is when you mentioned Tom, one of my favorite little things with Tom is when, you think he's dead after the Eye of the World. And then Rand finds him in Kyrian, and he takes Rand back to his house or his apartment, wherever his inn that he's staying at. And he's like, oh, I guess you got away from the Aes Sedai. I guess you aren't what I thought you are. And you realize, at least I did in that moment, Tom was suspecting from the start that one of these boys could channel. It was obvious to him. And that's why he got so involved, right? Because of his nephew.
Right. On reread, it's very obvious why Tom is involved. And then, but in the first place, it is, you question, like, as Matt certainly does, like, why is he so interested? But then it is clear later.
Right, and it's from their point of view. Maybe he's a dark friend. Everyone could be a dark friend.
Sure, anybody could
They
be.
really don't know who's there to
It
help.
becomes obvious, and it's also incredibly heartbreaking why he's so invested
Hmm.
in the two Rogers boys. Like once you learn about Owen and everything that happened, you're just like, "Oof, I was
Yeah.
not prepared for these feels."
Well, and another
Yeah,
thing, talking of like characters and their motivations, I have a little bit of concerns with bringing too much of New Spring in early as flashbacks, simply because one of the things that a lot of fans wondered with the first 2 or 3 books is what was Moraine's real intent, and it becomes clear by the end of book 3 for sure. But they have that Dark Friends social at the beginning of book 2, and Robert Jordan, I think, intentionally has Moraine missing from Faldara. Then you have the Dark Friends social, and there's a woman who may be an Aes Sedai who could be described as Moraine. Now, it isn't her, obviously, but there's some mystery there that maybe Moraine isn't who she says she is either. And I kind of hope they keep that mystery with her and Lan, because it makes it more interesting later when you find out her true intent. But
So that's interesting, and I've wondered about that in the show too, because they've made Rosamund Pike, a central focus, and so you kind of get the impression that Moraine as a character is going to be much more of a central focus at the beginning, and then it's more challenging to keep that mystery around her character when she's so central, and Rand is not necessarily. So it'll be interesting to see if they go in that direction. I've definitely thought they're going to try and obscure more who the Dragon Reborn is, and for longer in the show than they do in the books.
because the thing is, like, there's Moraine as the Eye of the World goes on. She, namely that first night when she comes up to rest Bella, to restore some vitality to Bella.
Right.
She quickly is like, "Oh, I don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
It's already been done." But there's still, for her, was that Egwene unconsciously doing it, or was it someone else? And then she checks Rand's horse, and she's like, "I don't need to do it for this one either." So one of these two, either Egwene is doing it for both horses, or they're doing it for their own. Like, there's that mystery for her, but she's able to narrow it down to.
Yeah, I think at the end of the book, she says, that it was with Bella. She should have figured out that it was Rand because of who was riding Bella, and that Rand would have been concerned most about Egwene, and because Bella was the smaller horse that, he was afraid wouldn't be able to keep up with the larger horses.
What I love, like, it shows us an in-series example of hindsight that we get, not only just having, reading through the series and remember stuff that has happened in the past, but doing rereads of the series. Like we've talked about often, and one of the best examples is the relationship that builds between Tom and Moraine. So your first read through, you get to Tar and Ferry, Tom flourishes a knife, and Moraine laughs, and you're like, okay, whatever. Then you finish the series, and you either think back on it or you go back and reread it. You're like, you sly motherfucker, Robert Jordan.
He's flirting with her, yeah.
And even at when they're really first lay eyes on each other on reread, it's like, oh, they know who the other one is. Like, they know from the beginning, and there's like this respect because they both have this great ability with the Game of Houses, and you can sort of tell that they know that right from the beginning. It's kind of fascinating.
If you haven't already, we did a collection of 3 episodes here on the Black Tower. We did one on Moraine, one on Tom, and then one on their relationship. That's one of the things we're trying to do, is we'll do a character analysis, then one of another character, and generally there'll be characters that wind up in some sort of relationship. We'll go back, and then we'll do a 3rd episode exploring their relationship.
Yeah, I like that.
The stuff that we're talking about right now that was in those 3 episodes, on the sort of characters, and culminating in the 3rd. If Tom and Moraine is something interesting, it might be something that you'd have a lot of fun going back and listening to in your spare time.
Yeah, I've listened to the first 2. I haven't listened to the one about the relationship yet.
I'm also I got partway through that one, but I love the idea that's a great topic.
Yeah, we've done that one. We did Lan and Nynaeve. I think those are the only relationships we've done thus far. Because we did one early on, way early on, like 2018, early 2019 maybe, on Pat and Fane. It's called The Dark Friend. And
There's just
really,
so much to
that's
mine in this
studying a
series. Yeah.
relationship. Yeah, I mean, it's basically like a relationship episode on Pat and
Mhm.
Fane and more and Mashadar.
Yeah,
Hmm.
But
I love it.
yeah. So on to topic 3, which I've already read out, I believe, to John. So I'll insert his answer here, and then it looks like, of course, I'm next. All right. um, do you guys want me to restate the topic
Yeah,
or?
it might be worth reiterating the question just to be
Yeah,
safe.
sure.
All right. So our third and unfortunately final topic for this episode. I say unfortunately, it's only unfortunate because I'm loving the discussion, not unfortunate because of the time we're getting to. Um, but what single character's death or conversion to the shadow, other than Rand, would have single-handedly doomed the forces of the light? John, you're first.
For this one, for me, there's a whole bunch of characters that would have doomed the light, but I'm going to pick a real unpopular one, Gawain. Now, I know people think he's an idiot and they don't like him. Just in general, the fandom has a lot of hate for this guy. And yeah, he's an idiot. He's not a smart man in any way, shape, or form. He does a lot of really dumb things in the books, but it makes him human.
I
No
may
one,
not be a smart man, but I know what love is.
yeah, nay.
You
That's
Gawain,
right,
you-
Egwene. But I mean, he's human, so he's a young man. He has never been in love before. He makes a lot of mistakes young men make in their first relationships by being overbearing and overprotective and thinking he knows what's best for Egwene, even though he really doesn't. But I think if early on he had been killed or turned to the shadow, he taught Egwene a lot of really good life lessons that led her to be the leader that she could be. I mean, she wasn't just a cold, heartless, and she was kind of turning that way near the end. Like if like I got the feeling that she could have been another Elena, like in a different way, of course, but like just as bad.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, bad, but I mean, in a different way. And he kind of grounded her a little bit, and he was like a lightning rod for her anger in some cases. And then the very last scenes of the book, during the last battle, when she used the reverse balefire and she did all of what she did, without him, I don't think she would have come to that point and did what she did. So I think if he hadn't been there to, you know, cause her the grief and the anger and make her grow as a character, and then, you know, the things I won't spoil too much about the last book. I know there's spoilers, but I won't say what happens the last battle or what leads up to the point where she did the things she did. But without him, she wouldn't have, and maybe she wouldn't have been able to repair the cracks in the balefire. Maybe there wouldn't have been a victory by the Dark One. Maybe everything just would have unraveled. That's my take on that.
Hey, you used the word unravel. I like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Which is also a fantastic anime opening song. Hashtag nerd. If you've never heard it, go on YouTube and look up the song Unravel Tokyo Ghoul English cover.
Cool.
It's really good. So I'm going to go with Matt. Had like the dagger from Shadar Logoth not been reclaimed, we would have had almost 2 Pat and Fanes, I feel, and one of them would have had insane luck. I don't feel that his luck was ever tainted or negated or anything by the taint from Shadar Logoth. If anything, his Tavir nature somewhat was, which raises the interesting question of the dynamic between how much of what happened with Matt and how lucky he got was because he was Taviran or because he was just insanely lucky. It seems like most of the fandom, including myself, view those two attributes as not the same. That Matt being Taveran is still separate from the amount of luck he has. Um, given, and it seems like almost a balancing of powers amongst, if you want to look at it as the core three or the boys from Mon's Field. Because obviously Rand is the strongest Taveran since Kinslayer or Arthur Hawkwing. But he can also channel, so he's got his Taveran +1 ability. Then you have Perrin, who's Taviran, but is also a wolf brother. So you have his Taviran +1 ability. And so for Matt, I see his luck as his, +1 ability. Because as we learn, his battle prowess and stuff, a lot of it comes down to luck. There's a lot of things that that happen because he is lucky, but is also an equal amount that happens purely because of the memories that he gets. Um, which, it's just like the age-old thing about genies. When you make a wish, make sure it's very specific, or you might not get what you thought you were going to get. And that's what happens to Matt. He's like, "Oh, I want the holes in my memory filled." And they're like, "Done. Here's a whole bunch of random memories from the past battles that you don't even really remember, but now you do." Um, but without the Matt that we have, should Matt have been, should he have succumbed to the dagger from Shadow Logoth, or being taken down by Coldane, or taken down by anybody else at any other point had he died? Um, to me, the biggest impact would be the Shan Chan would have never been as involved in the last battle as they were, or in the way they were, and all the critical battles that happened leading up to Tarmogoyf, that Matt was involved in, whether by sheer luck or his planning, wouldn't have happened, or at least not in the same way. Um, Plus, because of his connection with the other Mon Fielders, it would have had an undoubtedly devastating effect on the psychology of people like Egwene, Rand, Perrin, and Nynaeve. Um, and if Matt had succumbed to the dagger and Rand continued on the path that we see in the series, because there's a fair bit of the story where, after a certain point, the three boys aren't really together. They aren't really doing the same thing. Um, and that happens for Rand pretty pretty soon after these events. I I would hate to imagine the emotional and mental toll that would have taken on Rand, especially if they were unable to recover the dagger and horn from Pat and Fane in the Great Hunt. Um, but Rand and Perrin being childhood long-term friends of Matt, and seeing him either be killed or switching over to the side that is supposed to be the ultimate evil. Egwene, as someone that it has been harsh on him in the past, because he has always been that mischievous knucklehead that we all love. Can't wait to see Barney Harris throwing badgers everywhere. Um, you get a badger, and you get a badger. Everyone gets a badger.
That's one scene they should add in, is the actual badger scene.
Seems like they
Oh,
have to.
Yeah.
Oh, and then of course with Nynaeve, the initial reasoning for her leaving Montefield beyond the women's circle and village council not being able to make a decision is, she feels responsible for these children, as she, refers to them, even though she's not far from them in age. Um, I just think that his death, or his conversion to the shadow, could have very definitely had lasting effects beyond what his own character does. It could have been heavily detrimental to people like Egwene, Rand, Perrin, and Nynaeve. And I would hate to see what would have happened if, when they went to Tarmogoyf, if these four individuals, the rest of the people from Amon's Field, had to face Matt as an enemy on the battlefield. Would it be an amazing what if, like, branch series? Yes. Would I want, would I emotionally want to see it happen? No, because I can't imagine what it would do to these guys.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about this question, I mean, what popped into my head right away is just that there's no one answer to the question, because to me, I think one of the essential themes of the story is that this whole thing is not about one person, not even Rand. Um, the concept of the pattern, that all these different threads being woven together is what make up the pattern. And the idea is, if you pull any one single thread, then you're going to affect the whole weave. The outcome would have been different. And so you could almost pick like any character. But certainly some characters are more central to the weaving and would have a bigger effect. Can't argue with Matt. He's definitely one of those. So I kind of went in the direction of thinking like, okay, who did Rand absolutely need personally at multiple times in the series? And then even then I had to cheat. Like there's a few that jumped out at me. So so Min and Nynaeve and Perrin were the ones that really like jumped to mind for me. Is Rand needed them personally. So Min, because she was the one person who gave up everything just to be by his side, just to like emotionally be there for him and hold him together as much as possible. And that was really her role. And then she also, helped him with even theorizing about what he was supposed to do about the seals. But really it was more of the emotional aspect of her being there for him. I don't think he would have been able to hold it together to the extent that he did without her.
For sure.
And then Nynaeve, to me, she was the one person from Emmons Field that really, throughout the whole series, she really continues to put Rand over everything else. All other considerations that she has, Rand is more important than anything. And so that is what allows Rand to keep trusting her, even though she's tied to the White Tower, and that's really unique. He at certain points can't trust anybody else, especially people who are tied to the White Tower, but he does trust Nynaeve, and having that is also crucial. And then with like Perrin, we like literally see like Min has these viewings where he needs to be there for Rand to save his life, at Demise Wells, and then when he kills Sindane in the last battle. And then I also think of like when Perrin sort of being there for Rand during his epiphany on Dragon Mount, even though Rand couldn't see him. So anyway, I cheated. Couldn't pick just one. 3 was hard. Like, seriously.
I was thinking
the Olympics. We're going to call the committee to test you for doping.
Yeah. I definitely going to fail.
It really is hard. And I've been thinking a lot about the nature of the pattern, because my next video is about the wheel itself, how the pattern works, the creator, the Dark One. Sort of like I'm trying to start with like the foundation of what makes up this world that Robert Jordan has created. And so I've been thinking a lot about the Great Pattern, and there's some really fascinating quotes from Robert Jordan about it, where he talks about things like the pattern is, or the wheel is really just like a super advanced computer. Mm-hmm. And it has a preset design that it follows, like a blueprint. And, it's built to be neutral, but that means when things get out of whack, either too far to the dark or too far to the light, the pattern is there to self-correct, right? And so on the one hand, I was like, well, you could name so many characters that are vital, and if you remove that thread, the whole thing comes undone. But on the other hand, I wonder if the pattern wouldn't have self-corrected, if it wouldn't have figured out a way to balance the scales. One of my favorite theories, before the last book came out, a lot of people thought that Rand is thinking, I'm going to kill the Dark One. And one of the theories was that Padan Fain was building in power as a replacement for the Dark One when Rand went through with it. I thought that would have been a really interesting way to go. This idea that the wheel requires balance, and the Dark One is a necessary part of that balance. And so if the dragon or the hero or whoever it is figures out a way to do away with the Dark One, then the pattern has to have a replacement in place. And this idea that some people don't like how Padan Fain's story ended because it was so abrupt, but it's because Rand chose to allow the Dark One to live. And so Padan Fain was no longer needed. I think that's a really interesting concept. But anyway, I also have to say,
sure it's even an end?
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about in our episode on Padan Fain was there's no body, there's nothing definitive. It's just the mist that makes up Mashadar disappears into the ground.
Right. And the seed, or as I think Matt Hatch called it, the seed or the dagger, we don't know where that is. It could still exist. Right.
So, I mean, my thing with all of that, and I know this isn't the feedback part, and you're still in the middle of your thing, and I do apologize.
No problem. No.
I'm gonna exert a little bit of host privilege here. Is that we know that Shadow Logoth used to be called, what was it, Andral?
No, Eridol. Yeah.
There we go. I'm trying. There's only so many A words I can keep in my mind, and 30 of them are
so many
assholes.
similar names in the series. Anyway, yeah.
But Eridol was initially a fantastic and very strong civilization, almost, if not on par with Manetheren.
Mm-hmm.
And that its own greed is what created what we know as Mashadar, which I would love to see, there's so many potentials for branch off stories and like prequels and world building stories to come out of this.
Right.
I would love to see how that happened. But you take an entity like that gets merged with the entity that is Pat Unfeigned, who has already had his mind consistently torn apart and piecemealed back together like a gleeman's cloak by the Dark One.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I find the theory that maybe he was a potential replacement for the Dark One for Shaitan incredibly interesting.
Mm.
Because in my mind, it would take many, many more years for his mind to get to the point where he could. Because for me, he's just too spastic,
Yeah.
too out there, too unstable to be the Dark One.
Right. He's chaotic
I know,
and
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
But
There's no line.
doesn't he even kind of like break out of his chrysalis and become something greater and larger and more almost ethereal?
Oh yeah. Because I think during the last battle, he fully assumes the figure of Mashadar.
Right.
Fully gives himself over to it, which isn't the same as we see during the scene where Rand in disguise goes to visit that rebel army, and Pat and Fane attacks as Mashadar. I think at that time he might have been Or Death at that time. But we just see the entity that is Mashadar seek into the landscape that is Stakandar. That is a part of the dominion of Shao Ghul. So my thought with that has always been that it's an evil that's just been reabsorbed by the Dark One. But I always saw Shadar Haran as, if there was ever going to be a replacement, that it would be Shadar Haran.
Oh yeah, interesting.
And I've always seen Shadar Haran as the avatar of the Dark One. Not necessarily. Well, avatar is like a bit extreme of a word. I just don't know a lesser word.
Yeah. But then he's
like a
almost
lesser
like
avatar.
an extension of the Dark One. So, like, could he even exist independently of the Dark One? It kind of seems like he can't.
He's the Choden Call of the Dark One.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Or like, which direction does it go? I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
That's awesome.
Sorry, you were saying, Lauren?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's so fascinating. When you were talking, Andrew, about Matt, obviously Matt is so vital, and I loved what you said about his luck being more like a superpower than just his Taviran nature. There are other things that account for his Taviran nature, and I'm so sad that we are never going to get those Outrigger novels, because I think Robert Jordan's intent was to explore that further. I mean, when all is said and done, the concept of Taviran is they're only Taviran as the pattern needs them to be. It's not a lifelong appointment or power. But Rand continues to live after he's done what he needs to, in a different body, of course. He no longer has access to the one power, but he certainly has access to something. And then, Perrin, of course, is still able to talk to wolves. He still has the wolf dream. So I really like the idea that Matt continues on with this luck. And he also continues on with the memories of past generals. But that's just too bad that we never get to see any more of that, because I'm sure Robert Jordan had some plans for that.
Headcanon, Matt leads the Shan-Chan to reclaim the Earl territory as they see it,
Right.
to reclaim the lands of Altar Hawkwing.
And I think eventually, I'd like to think that Matt would have eventually convinced the Shan-Chan of their evil ways when it comes to enslaving channelers and other things. But I guess we'll never know what was intended there.
It should be relatively easy for him to point and be like, you see all the ones that weren't colored that you call, what is it, Marthra Damon?
Marath Damani, yeah.
Marath Damani. So bad with pronunciation if you hadn't already realized.
I don't know if I'm saying it right either.
Yeah. Like, you see all of them that we're doing all that crazy stuff. See, we don't have to do this. Oh, and by the way, here's the culture shattering knowledge that the people that can control the Damane, the soul Damane, they can learn to channel as well. That might be kind of awkward.
Right.
For, the Empire.
I also like to think that in those Outriggers, because I think the plan was to follow Matt and Tuon.
Right,
and
I believe so.
I like to think that Rand would have made a few cameo appearances doing whatever he did with that pipe. I like to think that he would have explored that further as well, but again, we'll never know. So going back to the topic, though, of specifically who would I pick that was sort of necessary, or what was the exact question? It's what single character's death
Yeah.
or conversion to the shadow would have single-handedly doomed the forces of the light? There is this possibility that just could not have happened. The pattern would have self-corrected. But on the other hand, when you think about it, I think Moraine is definitely up there on the list, because there was a point when she was thought to be dead, and it had so many negative consequences. I mean, she was basically, aside from Nynaeve and maybe Egwene, Moraine was the only Aes Sedai that Rand came to trust.
Yes.
And after she left, it had a whole ripple effect of him not trusting Aes Sedai, and then eventually being put in the box, and all these terrible things happen. Had she been there to continue to help guide him, a lot of that would not have transpired. He may never have. He may have learned to laugh. What was it? Laugh and cry.
Yes.
Earlier. And so
that's something that I think that the fandom agrees based off prophecy. And I mean, we have the privilege of knowing who is and isn't available at the times we see the prophecies fulfilled.
right.
Is that's more presumed to be a duty of Cad Swain than it is to be a duty of Moraine. Because in Moraine's
That's
letter
fair.
to Rand, she does tell him, "Trust no woman fully who is now Aes Sedai. I do not speak simply of the Black Aja, though you must always be watchful of them. Be as suspicious of Varen as you are of Alvarin. We have made the world dance as we sang for 3,000 years. That is a difficult habit to break."
Hmm.
And she says that in her letter to Rand. So,
Well,
if
that's
anything, I think that she encourages him to
yeah.
be of Aes Sedai, but
That's
for
fair.
a
That's
good
true.
reason. I'm not saying that Rand maybe doesn't go too far. And we do see where he does start trusting Aes Sedai that he should. Um, he does give some credence to Alana. He does give credence to Cad Swain. And of course, he does give some trust, though, once he finds out she's the Amaryllis seat, and after she solidifies the White Tower again, he's not as trustful of Egwene as he was, because Egwene falls into the typical habitual trap that I said I do. We know best. We can control the world. We advise the world on what to do. Um, but people like Elaine, um, I don't think he ever distrusts Elaine. Someone like Avienda, who is simply the only reason she's not an Aes Sedai is because she was born into IL culture, so she becomes a wise one. Um, it seems that his mistrust is very organization specific. It's not necessarily, if you're a woman that can channel, I'm not going to trust you, like we see in the opposite light, where nobody trusts any man that can channel. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's an interesting dynamic to think about. Did Rand take his distrust of Aes Sedai further than Moraine cautioned him?
Yeah, and it makes you sort of wonder if he almost needed to have that period of not trusting anyone, that maybe it protected him to some extent more than it harmed him. I mean, he needed to correct. He needed to find the right balance. But the whole concept of the pattern and what Lauren was saying about like it's self-correcting, it's sort of fascinating because it's this back and forth between these small changes matter, and one little thing has this ripple effect, and maybe you need everything to be perfect, or it goes the other way, and if it doesn't work this way, something else is going to come in and cause it to correct. So I don't know, it's a fascinating concept. You could talk about this for hours.
It's true. We probably can't come up with a solution for that, but
No,
it's
but
so
I don't
fun.
think there's an
Feel
answer.
kind of
Yeah.
bad for
I wanted
choosing.
to say one other thing, just to follow up from what John was saying about Gawain. I know he talked about this quite a while back, but one of the things he mentioned that perked my ears up a little. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I think it's really great how Egwene's story and Rand's story parallel each other so strongly, especially in The Gathering Storm and Towers of Midnight. And I think
Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson even talked about how he did that on purpose. He wanted to have the two of them sort of follow a similar journey, and they absolutely both needed their support systems. And I think, Rebecca, like you mentioned, Min was that for Rand, and Gawain was that for Egwene, for better or worse. I love that contrast and that parallel between their two characters.
Well, the thing that I always think about the Gowan Egwene story is that they are, it goes sort of in an opposite direction, right? Because Gowan, he needed to do more of what Min did, which is, if you're going to be the person that's supporting someone who needs to do something great, then you need to be willing to support that person and to not have to have your own glory. But he wasn't able to do that. And I think that's where, their story takes a tragic turn. And it isn't, unfortunately to me, in the books as effective as it could be, in part because the setup for Gawain and Egwene really isn't there. You don't really necessarily buy into how much they love each other as much as you do for some other characters. But the show does have that opportunity to fix that and have them spend more time with each other, have you buy into more of their feelings for each other. And I think it still goes in a tragic direction, but a tragic love story can be effective, can be meaningful, and be something that is riveting. And just knowing that it ends the way that it does, because Gawain can't get past that.
Right.
Unfortunately, they're kind of stuck with that kind of Snow White-esque love story, right?
Mhm.
Where you have this guy that is stricken with this woman. We can call her a princess of sorts, and just has this undying love for her. And part of it is catalyzed by what he's been informed of, what he believes is the truth about what Rand did to Queen Morghese. He fully believes that Rand killed Morghese. And seeing Egwene as one of his childhood friends, he's gonna feel bad for her. And whether it's a movie, real life, whatever, we see that some of the biggest catalysts for romance, be it long term or short lived, is tragedy. Being that person that's there. My ex fiance, we started dating a couple months after her middle brother committed suicide. So things like that. The people that are there for you in the darkest times, and Egwene did talk with him, and she defended Rand, but he's still going to see her as someone else being manipulated by this vile creature, that even the Amarylline Elida doesn't trust and all this other. So I can kind of understand, but for me, their romance seems more along the lines of like a Disney fairy tale, a Hansel and Gretel-esque story, than, for me, stuff that would be the more relatable romances, like, Tom and Moraine, or Rand and Avienda, Rand and Elaine, even though Rand and Elaine is still pretty fantasy-esque story. Oh, this beautiful man just fell in my garden. I will marry him
After I patch
and have
him
his
up.
children. Yeah. After I patch him up, and my asshole of a older brother who's really only trying to do the right thing snitches on everybody. But sorry, we went so
I know.
so far about it, but I love it. That's why it's so hard to do these things, right?
Yeah, but
Especially like I mentioned earlier, I kind of feel guilty for giving us 3 different topics. Because I was like, oh, it'll be easy. We'll talk, maybe 10 minutes about each topic, and we can ramble on a little bit. And here we are already at an hour and a half.
I'm loving it.
Beyond the pre-recording, and it's like one of those things, like, we know that for an episode, I'm more than happy to talk for like another 8, well, not 8 hours.
Yeah, I might need to sleep
you get what I'm
sometime.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
we get in these conversations like that, and they get so enthralling, and because we love the series so much, we want to keep talking about them. And if you've listened to just about any episode we've done before, this is what we do. We'll talk about a topic, and then we'll have 20 minutes where we go off on a tangent, and then finally one of us will sit there and be like, hey, you remember we were supposed to be talking about this, right? And it's so hard, because it's so easy for one statement about one situation or one character to make you think about 1,000 different other things. And that's what this expansive series does. And that's part of the reason we love it so much. But I am going to try to bring it back to Lauren's point where you were talking about Moraine's death, or alleged, the quote unquote death.
Yeah.
And the effects it had on the series.
Well, the big thing, I think, just to finish that thought, the big thing is she was obviously necessary, and she was one of the only 2 women there at the end in Shia Ghul, right? So clearly she was needed. Her whole story and her character is so good, and I don't necessarily worry if they do make her more of the focus in the first season. I like how Robert Jordan presented her to be sort of mysterious. Rand's eventual title as the dragon obviously wasn't as mysterious. And I wouldn't mind if they switched that and it was more Moraine focused and all that. I'm okay with all of that. As long as one of the things I've thought about is, Rosamund Pike is a big name for the show.
Mhm. Yep.
And
Oh yeah,
Moraine's
Miranda
character
Frost.
is gone.
Miranda Frost, I love you.
Yeah. And she's, Moraine is going to be gone for at least a season or two. And
Maybe.
so maybe.
I mean, I think they could make her gone for a shorter period of time and work around it if they want to. But
That's
go
true.
on.
Ooh,
Sorry,
what
go
if they do like flashes to her in the realm of defense?
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That
Yeah.
could be cool.
I didn't think of that.
But I also kind of want to see, because that there, and again, I'm cutting in again, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That's a juicy little nugget that we as the readers of the series can have.
Mm-hmm.
True.
If they do make it look like Moraine has actually died and that she's never coming back, we as the readers get to watch what's going on and interact with the rest of the fandom with the knowledge,
Oh yeah.
It's like,
but also
like
the
the Red Wedding.
responsibility. Yeah. But
Yeah.
It's
If people are
it'd be
going to
neat,
think it's
but
like that.
also
Yeah.
huge. It's also a huge responsibility. Like it's gonna be like that final scene at Rand's funeral at his pyre.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
you guys don't seem too disturbed. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You'll find out.
It will be interesting to see if they. I mean, we talk about. I started talking about how I was concerned they're cramming too much into so few episodes, and maybe they aren't doing that. We don't know. But the later books, you could cram 2 or 3 books into a season. I feel like so.
I agree. Yeah.
I do think the last 3 books, or at least the last book and a half, should be their own seasons each. But
Yeah.
there are definitely some things we could cut. So you could go from Moraine being or disappearing in the redstone doorframe at the end of the Fires of Heaven to possibly her being saved by Matt by the end of the next season or something. But I still think there's got to be at least 4 to 8 episodes or a full season of her being gone and everyone thinking she's dead. Right?
Probably.
I think it has to happen. But
Agreed. To really drive home the point, even get close to the effect it has for us readers when we're reading the series. Guys, those of you that are hoping that maybe she doesn't disappear for that long or it's only a couple episodes, it's got to happen. I think I agree. It's got to happen.
right.
Push it back.
I don't know if you guys watch Stranger Things, and I don't want to spoil it. For
I haven't
people who have.
seen it yet.
Okay, well, I won't. I'll be very vague, but there is a important character at the end of the last season who is thought to be dead. To be honest, kind of a similar situation. There was a portal, went through the portal, probably dead. The portal was destroyed. They just released a teaser for the next season that just came out like yesterday, and it shows that actor back.
Mm-hmm. So it could end up being a very similar kind of dynamic there. Interesting.
Right. And I think there's this element too of when it's a TV show, ahead of time who the cast is, at least to some degree. If Rosamund Pike supposedly if Moraine dies at the end of a season, but she's still in the cast for the next season. Sometimes you have to handle that different.
They had to work with Kit Harington. I mean, anyway.
Right. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how they get. Let's just hope they get there, right? Let's hope that the show is so great that they get to that point and we can all freak out about it when it happens. It's going to be awesome.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Indeed. So wow. So much more I want to talk about, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. But we do have limited time. Everybody has time constraints, and of course, we all know that podcasts that go beyond an hour and a half to 2 hours and such can be difficult to be listened to, though we can always divide it into 2 parts. But since that was our final topic, and I feel like it'll get a lot of discussion going, and I want to see a ton of discussion. Let's go ahead and let's grab. For those of you that haven't, as listeners already noticed, I've had to splice in some of John or WoT Up's segments because he did have to leave about almost an hour ago. In 15 minutes, it'll be an hour ago. Jesus. Time flies, but the wheel weaves, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We let him go ahead and say some of the stuff he was going to say ahead of time, so I can splice it in at relatively appropriate moments. So do please understand for that. Trying to work with everybody's schedule, and the mere fact that these fantastic YouTubers are able to carve some time out of their life, out of what they've got going on, and doing their own content on YouTube, to come and talk with us. I am more than happy to do everything I possibly can to make it work and as seamless as possible. But since we are pretty much here at the end, if you guys want to take about 1 to 2 minutes or so, roughly, I could say 1 to 2 minutes. It's more of a guideline, as we know from everything we've talked about prior to this, which is fantastic, and I love it. To give some final thoughts on any of the topics that we talked about, or all of the topics, or the will and time in general. Um, and we will go ahead and start with you, Lauren.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you. I mean, it's a difficult job to get a bunch of different adults together and get the scheduling worked out and to make that happen. So just hats off to you for making this work. I know that this has been quite a bit in the making, and there's been talk of trying to get different people on. And I just really am thankful that you guys brought me on and that you put in that effort. This has been a really fun opportunity for me. I hope to do more of this type of stuff and just chat with other fans of the series. And I hope that people will continue to check out my channel. I'm blown away by the support I've had so far, and I'm so thankful for this awesome community. I am working on the next video. I cannot promise when it will be out because I have a busy life. My wife was very nice to take the kids away tonight so that I could do this. But yeah, this is awesome, and I hope that we can do many more of these types of things. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, and I want to do the same, to thank you all so much for having this great conversation. It's so challenging. I mean, we do this because we love it. A lot of us have lives, we have kids, we have things that make it so challenging to do these things, but we do it because we love it.
I have neither of those.
You must have a life. I mean, come on. But no, it's I think what was so great here is like we get into these conversations and it spawns like a dozen other topics that we all just are dying to dig into, just from one stray thing, and it just shows how much there is to love about this series. And so I love that. And if those of you who are listening like that too, I mean, definitely check out my channel, because that's what I'm doing in my reread series, for taking a few chapters at a time, and you just like dig into like all these little details that are going on in those chapters, that you only pick up when you're rereading the series, that you're not going to see the first time through. So I love being a part of this with so many people are creating wonderful things. It just blows me away to see what all the different content creators, including you guys, both of you, all of you, are creating. So thank you.
Absolutely. I would love to come back. I had a lot of fun here. I appreciate you guys, what you do. Rebecca, your channel is amazing. Lauren, your channel is amazing. You guys are great. I love the fact that all of the Wheel of Time YouTubers and podcasts and creators and artists all come together, and no one is in competition with anybody. We're all trying to build each other up and help each other, and we're all just having a great time with it and having fun. I think that's really truly what makes a really great community. And I really hope that the core community, the people right now that love the books, that are kind of staying together, stay that way through the whole aspect, even when we get millions of more people in, and it does increase maybe some of the bad apples, that we can all kind of stay tight knit, which would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Great thoughts.
Likewise.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. I do have to go. So thank you all for having me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time. Thanks so much.
No worries. And you'll see how the editing works out on Monday.
I will. I'll listen to it, and I'll be like, yeah, I was there the whole time. It was great. Guys, I appreciate it. Let me duck out. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
It's great chatting with you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
See ya.
It's definitely our pleasure. As everybody's already alluded to, it does take a fair amount of work to make this happen. Not gonna lie, getting Lauren and Rebecca and John into our Discord, giving them the appropriate roles, creating the right channel so that we can all just kind of freely talk about, when we're available and when we're not, um, made it a lot easier. The initial thing, a lot of this takes place on Twitter. A lot of times it's, hey, let me send Nablus a message on Twitter and then send Unraveling the Pattern a message on Twitter. And, I've got like 6 different messages going on to different YouTubers or other content creators. Um, and I'm trying to remember when this person and that person is and isn't available. And eventually it always hits a point where, could you please, for the love of God, get on Discord if you're not already? And most of the time, most people have a Discord, whether they've created one for themselves. I know a lot of YouTubers, a lot of podcasts, a lot of streamers, a lot of really just anybody um, use Discord and create a Discord for themselves or their channels or their podcast or whatever medium they're working with on whatever topic. Um, and it's such a fantastic tool because the coordinating for times and availability, it just went so much smoother once we made a Discord channel about it. I'm not gonna lie. Um, so Nablus, huge shout out to you. We know you're busy, brother. No worries. Do what you got to do. Make that bread, son.
Mhm.
Um, he was originally one of the first 3 contacted to be on this episode. We were working with him, but as you guys know, Nablus is a very, very busy man. Um, and his business schedule did not allow him to be here, even though he did want to. And I'm incredibly thankful that Lauren here from Unraveling the Pattern uh, was so readily willing and available to be on. And I'm not going to say take his spot
No, that's
Mhm.
impossible.
because that just sounds wrong. And then these guys can, Lauren and John and Rebecca, they can see some of the backgrounds. There was no, you guys let me know. Did it look like either any of the YouTubers got any preference in the order of which they talked in the little guideline document we had?
That was great.
Yeah, it was a good
You're
mix.
very
Yeah.
accommodating.
We like to rotate it around because at the end of the day, it's a discussion amongst some Wheel of Time fans. And I don't care if you have 5 subscribers or 5 million subscribers. Um, yeah, I mean, there's the obvious reality of the fact that somebody with 5 million subscribers would be a major bonus to being on, but um, ultimately the point is we love having fans in general across all mediums that come on, and I love doing this kind of. For me, it feels like bridging. Not that there's a gap, but bridging the gap between podcasting and YouTube. Um, and I know I've seen this comment or this statement from most YouTubers that we have come on that they really appreciate the fact that they don't have to make sure that they get all dolled up or
Yep.
whatever the heck. Or they don't have to comb their hair or dress a certain way to be on camera.
It's just a little
Uh,
refreshing for a change. That's all. Yeah.
uh, um, and then there's a ton of people that appreciate. There are some podcasts that keep it very PG, very I guess you might want to say professional. Um, whatever the case may be. And so there's certain language you can't use, and then we do this, and it's like, eh, say whatever you want. Don't really care. Um, and that's always been the format here at the Black Terror Podcast. But all of our guests, like Rebecca has said, like Lauren has said, they have their own lives. They have things going on. You guys know the struggle of children. I don't. Um, yeah. Um, I'm familiar with it because I have a lot of friends that have kids. I'll say a lot of friends. That implies I have a lot of friends. I have friends that have children, and we've worked with, Josh himself has a full family.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something we're familiar with working with. We understand the constraints of that, and things pop up all the time last minute. Um, but I do want to extend our sincerest gratitude to you guys for being here today, for giving us some of your time, more time than I honestly thought we were going to be doing this for. But that's kind of how most of these go. Um, and together, at the end of the day, we all create fantastic content about an amazing series that we all love. And we as a podcast, we're lucky we only have to worry about the audio aspect, whereas you guys as our guests, you have to worry about putting in hours and hours of editing both video and audio and making sure that they link up and there's no audio drift where you're walking. It's like the old foreign films where your lips don't match the words.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
Um,
I've dealt with that before. Yep.
yeah. Then the animations, the effects, the transitions, so on. You guys do amazing work, and we look forward to watching your videos so much more in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think there should be more of these kinds of crossovers with podcasts and YouTube because they are different worlds, but we are, we have a lot in common,
Absolutely.
Oh, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all content creators, right?
Yes,
More importantly, we're Wheel of Time fans.
absolutely.
So awesome. Thank you guys again. Yeah, it's been great. And yeah, just thanks for having me. And I can't wait to do this again sometime.
Fantastic. Do you guys want to plug your channels? And I'll do John's for him since he had to leave.
Okay. So, yeah, again, Rebecca, and my channel is Reading the Pattern. And whether you're read the books a million times or you haven't, you definitely find some content on my channel that you might like.
Yeah, and mine is Unraveling the Pattern, very similar name to Rebecca's. And my goal is to try to create sort of like introductory videos for people who are new to the Wheel of Time because of the TV show, but then to also have some really great spoiler discussions. So my hope actually is to have two videos. When I do release a video, I'll have one that's sort of the spoiler-free video, and then the other that's more spoiler-heavy. And I actually hope to do something similar to this, where I just get some other content creators together. Maybe we do a panel and just talk a little bit about some of the things I couldn't mention in the spoiler version. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that in the future.
You guys remember the really fancy What is the Wheel of Time video with all the animations and stuff that broke down the word count and everything? Yeah, that was this guy.
And now I've got the pressure to make another one that hopefully is as good or better. But
I
I've
think
started it, and it's really cool so far. I'm really having fun with it. So
it's just different, right? You take your time because that's the whole point, right? Of you're doing a different kind of video, that it takes the time to do that, and everybody's creating different kinds of content. So we don't,
it's
Oh, yeah.
it's all great. Yeah.
yeah.
That's definitely not to belittle anything that Rebecca's done. A lot of her videos are fantastic. Everything from spoiler-free character introductions to reweeding,
Yep. Rereading and rereading.
reweed,
She's deep in the
Rereading.
weeds.
Deep in the
Yeah.
weeds. Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah, no, my reread of the Eye of the Worlds. I'll be moving on to the Great Hunt soon.
oh yeah,
And
five biggest problems with or 5 things Game of Thrones fans will love about
Yeah.
Wheel of Time.
yeah, do my Game of Thrones comparison.
That was
I get
great.
into all this fan controversy over casting for the Wheel of Times. I dig right into that. A lot of stuff.
Oh yeah, Rebecca gonna set you straight on y'all's
Oh, yeah.
misgivings on that. And then of course, I'll try as best as I can to say as much as I can for WoT Up since he had to step away. But WoT Up has been putting out some fantastic content. I believe he has a collab episode with you, Rebecca.
Yes, we did.
Do you happen to remember the name of it?
So we were just taking on like a hot topic. Basically, we were discussing who we thought maybe should be cut from the show. It's a little out of date now because the one I picked has already been cast. So I will say that, but no, hopefully we'll do more. And with I can also just say for John's channel, like he's great about keeping on top of the latest Wheel of Time news for the TV show. So if you want someone who's going to be on top of that stuff, that's a great channel.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
fantastic stuff. He does a community spotlight.
Mhm.
He's featured a ton of podcasts. He featured Black Tower, as some of our listeners fervently let us know about, and it was fantastic, and we loved it, and more than appreciative of it. Just puts out some fantastic ones. Everything from leaked videos, or rather leaked images. His most recent one being the potentially leaked image of what might be a Waygate or not.
Right.
Go and watch his video to find out more about that. He also addressed some of the first leaked set photos with the nice foggy, smoky background, as well as a ton of different videos, stuff of Wheel of Time, who should have a cameo, Wheel of Time news on the directors, composers, extras, and the like. Just a ton of fantastic content. Again, all of these guys' channel links will be in the description of the episode. You're going to need to click on the link. Then you're going to need to find that nice red subscribe button and click on that. Then there's going to be a little bell icon. You're going to need to click on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to need to go down in the comments and say, hey, love, at a bare minimum, say, hey, love your content, love seeing it, look forward to much more. But feel free to mention that maybe you heard them on the Black Tower podcast.
Please, I would love to know that if you came to my channel from the Black Tower podcast. That would be awesome.
If I get a message from either of you and say more than 5 people said it, I will be absolutely floored. I'm not going to lie.
I know they won't, but that's okay.
It would be awesome to see that for sure.
I would be incredibly shocked but thrilled at the same time, because I think that because of the way this community is meshed together, because of how inclusive, frequently, we'll refer to the community as being the Twitter of Time community, because that's the one that we as a podcast engage the most with. But
yeah,
ultimately, it's the entire Wheel of Time community, because of how just amazing this community is in general. Everything from talking about fan theories and casting ideas and headcanons, all the way to when a member of the community has a potential personal illness. You guys have probably seen this stuff with Rob Christensen, the maker of the Weekly Wheel News, to Mandar the horse. All of those people, whenever they talk about, hey, I've got stuff going on in my personal life, and there's always a ton of comments that flood to them to show support and show love. And to me, that's what makes the Twitter of Time or the Wheel of Time community stick out beyond all others, because I don't see much, if any, hate. And very quickly, if there is, more people rush to attack that than ever rush to Tarmageddon. So it's just a fantastic community. But again, links to their channels will be in the episode description. If you can't see it wherever you're listening to this from, go to blacktowerpod.podbean.com and you'll find it in this episode description. You can reach out to us on Twitter at Tower Podcast. Lauren, Rebecca, do y'all have Twitters?
Yep.
Yes.
You do. But
yep, I'm pretty active on the Twitter of Time community as well. So definitely follow me on Twitter.
What's your Twitter?
Oh, it's at Pattern Reading.
I just changed mine. I better double check.
If you want to go follow the WoT Up, it is at WoT Up 5, the number 5.
Yeah, mine is at Unraveling WoT, at Unraveling WoT.
There you go. So go follow him on Twitter too. And again, you can see and listen to all of our episodes along with the associative links, whether you want to find out what music we're using for the intro, outro, a link to our Patreon, a link to the merch store run by Spreadshirt, whatever it may be, as well as a link to our Discord. As I've mentioned Discord kind of heavily already. You can find that all on our hosting site at blacktowerpod.podbean.com. But we're going to wrap this up here and now. We thank you guys so much for coming out and listening. Again, thank all of the fantastic YouTubers that have joined us. Again, our channels being Unraveling the Pattern. I guess we need to start in order. We need to start in order with WoT Up so we can figure out what's going on. Then we need to start with Reading the Pattern so we can figure out what's going on with the pattern. And then we can unravel the pattern
at
the end. So it's full circle. You get your start, middle, and end all the way through there. But thank you guys so much for being with us. And look forward to doing this with some or all of you guys in the future, hopefully.
I hope so. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, for those of us here at the Black Tower Podcast and our fantastic guests, thank you all so much for spending time and giving us some time to listen. And we will see you all in the next episode, which once you hear this will actually be coming out the following Friday. Because we missed last Friday, but we're not going to talk about that. We'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks again. Have a fantastic night, evening, whatever it is for you. And walk in the light. I mean, if you want to.
You've been waiting for this moment, for this feeling to grow. In the shadows, always watching, always running the show. tower.